afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Eliminating Manual Data Entry, Best Practices in Document Management. My name is Elise. I'm part of the marketing group here at SageWorks, and I'll be doing some introductions and just a bit of housekeeping before I turn it over to our speaker today. Some quick housekeeping before we get started. If you haven't been on one of our webinars in the past, we do have a Q&A at the end of the webinar, but please feel free to submit questions at any time during the webinar. There's a box to enter questions in the GoToWebinar panel on your screen. Additionally, we always get asked if the slides will be available, and they'll be available shortly in the handout section for you to download at your leisure. We'll also follow up after the webinar with the slides. A little bit about SageWorks, if you aren't familiar with us. We are a financial information company based in Raleigh, North Carolina. For the past 10 years, we've been building software to help banks and credit unions grow profitably while mitigating risk. At SageWorks, we build software. When we build software, we focus on building interconnected systems and solutions rather than standalone products. This enables data to flow seamlessly, and it eliminates duplicate work and streamlines communication. I also just wanted to take a moment to quickly mention the SageWorks 2017 Risk Management Summit. This year, we're very excited to be in Denver, Colorado from September 25th through the 27th. Learn more and register at sageworks.com/summit. Now, we also include a legal statement for all webinars, and you will receive a copy of this in the slides to peruse at your leisure. But in summary, this presentation may contain forward-looking statements relative to publicly available industry data, but of course, we can't predict the future, and these statements are not intended to advise a specific course of action. I also just wanted to mention here, today we're going to be talking a little bit about SageWorks Electronic Tax Return Reader. And I just wanted to mention that we are very excited to have been the 2017 recipient of the Barlow Innovation Awards, Monarch Award. And now, go ahead and present our presenter today is Bryce Luger, Senior Credit Risk Consultant at SageWorks. At SageWorks, Bryce helps financial institutions navigate the implementation and configuration of connected solutions. He brings a background in technology, consulting, and education, which has provided a strong foundation for optimizing the needs of bankers with the nuances of software. In his years at SageWorks, he has provided hundreds of banks and credit unions with technical implementation, consulting, and advisory services. So at this point, I'll turn things over to Bryce.
All right, excellent. So thanks so much, Elise, and good afternoon to everyone. I want to kick things off here at the beginning, make sure you guys know what you're in for from an agenda standpoint. We'll start with a bit of an introduction, really taking a moment to talk about what it is that we see at SageWorks within the industry on a day-to-day basis, working with over 1,200 financial institutions, speaking with multiple institutions on a daily basis, and just some of the things I and my colleagues have been able to glean in doing client implementations and discussing on kind of the sales and solution search side of things. Kind of the order of operations, which may seem a hair odd to you at first, but they will make sense, I can assure you. We'll then get into the electronic tax return reader, do a little bit of a what is it, a product demonstration, very short and brief, as well as an FAQ, right? We get a lot of questions about it, and I think we can probably answer the vast majority of them on the upfront here. From there, we're going to transition into discussing a little bit of the annual review process, discussing really some of the best practices we've found right and wrong over all the years for document collection, and what is really kind of the best way to streamline that process for increased efficiency and a better borrower experience at the end of the day. We'll close that up at the end, guys, with application strategies, kind of closing the loop, working in reverse order. And once we have concluded on that piece, we'll synthesize everything together with an end in mind, and we'll take any questions from a wrap-up standpoint. So really, first and foremost, guys, I don't think that this particularly will be a surprise to you. One of the three key things that we see in the industry as it sits today is really kind of an ever-increase in competition and compliance. I think a pretty realistic argument could be made that you could flip the compliance and the competition lines and still get a pretty reasonable representation. And one of the unspoken, I mean, some folks address it head on, and some folks really don't acknowledge it much at all, is really just the change of demographics. You know, baby boomers have been borrowing for a very significant amount of time. Many of them are no longer in need of financing, at least from a business standpoint side of things. Maybe some consumer lending, but is not particularly near what it was 10 to 20 years ago. You're starting to see an increase in Generation X and even Generation Y, or the millennials, right? And they really, I dare say, demand, or at least expect, a very different experience as a borrower than maybe the traditional ways in which we've done business. So that really leads us to the next point, guys, which is what we often actually see on the ground level at financial institutions today, banks and credit unions alike, both large and small, is disconnected systems and manual reentry. And I'm sure you guys are probably nodding your heads, or at least recognizing some of this, whereby, we may be underwriting in Excel, we may have a separate sheet for risk rating, we're re-entering all this data into the credit memo, and few, if any, of these particular items on the screen that really represent kind of the entire credit life cycle actually communicate with the core system. So sometimes we re-enter things as few as maybe 2 or 3 times, but as many as 7 to 10 times, literally just the origination of a single credit, much less the annual review, heaven forbid it be quarterly or semi-annually. This also leads to kind of a different discussion around documentation. It's a pretty common initiative for folks to say that they want to go paperless, which is an idea that we're going to explore a little bit later. I know it's definitely not a new concept, but I think a lot of folks really don't have the idea of paperless as being we're going to take paper and scan it, because at the end of the day we still have paper. That's not particularly paper-free. And I want to show you guys something a little bit different, as opposed to strictly just things that we've observed just by communicating within the industry and observing the behavior. Here is some strict statistical data from your call reports that is actually indicating to us, and FFIEC reports, to say very specifically your black curve being loan growth. Literally since 2004, this is community banks and financial institutions between $250 million in assets all the way up to $9 billion, not quite yet our DFAST banks. So as you guys think of it, that's really the band of community banks. We're seeing loan growth extrapolated there within the blue for loans per employee growth. Now, when I first took a look at this graph, I thought at first it was really exciting. There are some very sharp lines, and not to give you any kind of overly sophisticated observation, but really more to say that as we have actually taken this information and normalized it, you really see that raw loan growth spike and plummet at times. And what you would really expect is loans per employee growth to actually compound over time and to stay a little bit lower. On the surface level, it does appear to do so. So up front, it would appear that all seems well. But interestingly enough, when we are able to actually smooth that data, it's a little bit more telling. Remove some of the, kind of far-fetched outliers, the hyper performers and underperformers, and actually put a trend line to this. I hope you guys can see those dotted lines there. The particular piece that stood out to me the most in observing this, as well as some of my peers, was that, we anticipated as technology has actually increased and folks are kind of ever aware of, better ways to automate versus just throwing kind of people with the problem. A lot of banks say what they want to do is grow with the people they have, and I hear the same thing at credit unions. We want to grow an MBL, but we don't want to add a lot of heads. We want to make sure we can do the best with what we have. That's where automation tends to play. And if you start to notice there, really particularly around 2012 to 2017, it really would appear, if we're looking at it closely, that we're adding people just as much as we are adding loans, even with the compounding of loan growth over time. We're not seeing any of the spikes there where we might actually see loan growth per employee, where folks are actually doing more tasks and wearing more hats. It's actually statistically to the contrary, and that's kind of an interesting indication there. I'm sure there's many ways it could be interpreted, but that was just one of the things that sprung to mind for us, which really raised an important question in my mind when we were having this discussion for this webinar today, which is really, what is a better way to manage documents? So as we look at what's been going on today, aside from making a living, we're producing a lot of paper, right? We're getting tax returns by hand. Somebody's literally with a pen filling in their application. They're filling out their personal financial statement. They're bringing us disconnected and just disjointed K-1 if they own businesses. We have paper all over the place, and that is not particularly what folks say they set out to do. And it sets kind of an interesting precedent when you think of it, because once we have manual paper documents, we end up entering data by hand or by keyboard if we're doing our credit analysis in Excel. We're rekeying our credit presentation. We're taking the same data and just putting it into a different format. So really kind of at the end stage here, it's a significant duplication of effort. We actually have to do something with the paper, or at least image it so that we can store it then in a separate imaging system. And then we kind of repeat this cyclical process at review. As you guys look here, kind of the road to approval as I've tabbed it, the application, the underwriting, the credit presentation, the boarding, the imaging, those are all manual tasks unless we're actually leveraging technologies where we can communicate each and every one of those tasks from one to the next. And just as we had indicated a moment ago, that is cyclical when we get around to quarterly or annual reviews. We require documents, we underwrite them again, we produce another review memorandum, and then we go back and we image and store these things for safekeeping. It's just not the greatest precedent to set as we think about the paradigm shift and where we are at today environmentally. So I think the most common logical questions are, well, I mean, first and foremost, what can we do about it? But second, how do we get our borrowers to buy in, right? We need to make it easier on them. So logically, where would we start? And I wanted to start you guys with a little bit different of an item than you might have thought. And we actually are going to start with the electronic tax return reader. The purpose of this solution is actually, in a simplistic format, very straightforward. It's to allow you guys to take electronic tax returns, PDF outputs, and automatically not only upload the document itself for storage and safekeeping, but to actually spread this tax return without having to manually key any data items in yourself, save for maybe your adjustments, as you absolutely should as an analyst or a lender that is underwriting a deal. One of the questions is maybe, why would we start here? Realistically, guys, it's very straightforward. We can see the time saving. Don't think of your individual 1040 for somebody that's making, let's say, a very median income that has perhaps a home mortgage, right? There's some benefit in that. It might save you 15 or 20 minutes, and that's great. That's a starting place. But let's think about borrowers that actually have multiple properties tucked away on their Schedule E, or perhaps businesses that have those properties on 8825. I feel very confident if I were to poll the room, there would be plenty of you that have borrowers with 20 or more individual properties, perhaps even up into the 50s or maybe even triple digits. It's not particularly uncommon, especially as we increase in asset size and location. Secondarily, this allows us to get a little bit faster response back to the borrower if we're not manually underwriting the entire process. This is kind of a simple start, but there will be multiple applications as we go forward, guys. So from here, just to give you kind of a quick segue instead of these fantastic slides, I'm going to give you a quick look at how this actually occurs in the product through two separate lenses. First, we have a business here with which we've already been doing, we've had a relationship established, right? It's the first annual review, and it's time for new documentation. I could go manually key the tax returns or the financial statement, but if I select my electronic tax return reader, it will simply prompt me for the appropriate file from my computer, at which point, if password protected, I will input that password and perhaps upload the return. Very simplistic here, guys. One return, maybe an average size, 75, a couple hundred pages. You shouldn't see more than maybe 15 to 20 seconds, give or take. Give me a plus minus of 5 or 10 there at the most. A lot faster, right? You likely will not be able to go and get your Keurig to spit out another cup of coffee in the time that it took for this to upload successfully. But it's not about the data transfer simply of just the file. It's here where I have taken this data and automatically transferred it into the system as opposed to keying it by hand. And I don't feel that it's going to be beneficial to force you guys kind of ad nauseum, schedule by schedule, but to give you a very simplistic example of what we just discussed of multiple schedules, think Schedule C's, K1s, E Part 1s, or right here, your 8825, we can capture up to 200 properties or additional schedules here. So the more complex the borrower, the more time you're saving on the back end. Now, ultimately, this isn't to reduce or minimize anyone's job. It's to actually put you into a position in which you're not performing mundane, non-expert tasks. If you guys look very closely here, I can see exactly what is mapped in from this financial statement, or shall I say the tax return, into this financial statement. So if I wanted to take a quick look, let's say at the contents of overhead, or any of these data mapping items, there's no black box, and you can very clearly see how we got there to make adjustments as you see fit, right? It is to be expected that you guys may make an adjustment, a deduction or an add back for one-time gains or unexpected losses that are indeed irregular. Now, to take us perhaps through a different look at things where maybe perhaps you would see a little bit different type of time savings, we're going to take a look at perhaps a company that we have never done business with before. I'm going to take 3 tax returns for this given borrower or prospective borrower at this point. We haven't been able to analyze their numbers yet, but it won't take us long to get there. We've selected our 3 periods of data. It will take perhaps maybe twice the amount of time as the first, but the real key here, guys, is that it's going to take all 3 of those periods of data and spread them for us. And maybe perhaps while this is working, this is a good opportunity. If you guys feel I have not covered anything in specific you have a question about, to send one of those over, and if I get an opportunity, I'll try to answer it real quick. Apologies, it is already done. So now if I were to select all 3 periods and actually review them, instead of having to go through and assess taxes, I now have all of this tax data in a financial statement format, whereby, again, I can get into as much or as little detail as I see fit per my institutional policy or preference. So I didn't want to give you guys too much of kind of a product piece there, but I felt it may be helpful to specifically see how this works. Now, the question may arise, exactly what forms are compatible and what's going on here? What we're not doing is taking one of those, shall we say, traditional pieces of paper that we have acquired and running it through a scanner and then taking a guess if a 2 was actually a 7 or if a 3 was an 8. What we are actually doing is taking the original output file, as you guys might think of it, if you utilize an accountant or maybe even TurboTax yourself at home. Besides a great refund check at the end, you get a PDF, right? That is the native output of software, which is what everyone utilizes today if tax preparation is indeed a service that they provide. That is just the way of the world and the trend that will absolutely continue into the future if it is not completely 100% dominated to this day. So all we need are those original output files. So really the question becomes then, how do we get more of them? I've seen this go a lot of different ways, and I don't know particularly that there's a wrong way to do it. You guys understand your market better than anyone else, which is the appeal of working with a credit union or community bank that is not one of our mega banks to not be named, right? It's a better experience. You guys understand the borrowers and a better way to reach them, so I'm going to provide you a couple ways to think about it. First and foremost, just educating them, letting them know, hey, when you guys run through TurboTax or you work with your accountant, don't ask them for paper. It's an unnecessary step. If we get the original file, you can print it as many times as you need. If you provide that to us, we can get an answer back to you, or maybe we dangle a carrot. Perhaps we incentivize them with a slightly reduced fee. I think if we were to maybe assess this on a macro level, we could find the economics would weigh out pretty considerably. Even more so if we're doing this to set the stage or the precedent for future behavior. Secondly, one piece that I found to be very particularly successful is actually taking yourself out locally, perhaps taking lenders or some of the leadership at your institution out to the accounting firms that do the most business mutually with your borrowers. Talking to them and saying, hey, you know, we've actually acquired this really great software that allows us the capability to take an electronic output of a tax return and spread this automatically. We can get decisions and robust analytics much faster. So if you guys have folks that we're doing mutual business with, if we were to get the permission from them, would it be okay? Would you guys provide that to us if we gave you an easy way to do so? Very much, guys, with a very high likelihood, or shall we say a very high success rate, this has been a mutually beneficial thing for all parties involved. If I'm an accountant and I have a borrower, or not shall I say a borrower, but a client of mine that I'm doing consulting with or an engagement with, and they need capital, I would prefer that they get capital from someone that's not going to treat them like a second-rate borrower, as we're doing business with community-type businesses as well. But additionally, I want someone that can get back to them quickly, not someone that's going to take 30 days to decision a loan for $300,000 or $400,000. That's not really the best borrowing experience. This provides networking and a mutual referral opportunity, just something to consider for those of you particularly savvy and social out there. So let's take this in a different direction. How could we take these principles that we just discussed and maybe build on it a little bit? Let's think about the annual review process versus just initial document acquisition for a moment. Best built on strong foundations, we can indeed improve the borrower experience and make it better for us, the financial institution. One of the first steps that we have seen specifically to be successful is realizing that not every two borrowers are going to communicate in the same way, and I think you guys are very, very in tune with that. So as opposed to sending our standard letter, our standard phone call, our standard email, we can take a look at a tiered approach that might actually let everyone know what we're up to and how we're going to make life a little bit better for them, to make it better to be a borrower from our institution. So just to give you this quick run through as an example, if I wanted to send that initial letter, maybe 45 days before documents were due, should I have the appropriate system in place to do so that will take my business rule inputs and allow me to incorporate my own templates, we could generate those things automatically and send that first letter. Follow up maybe with a stacked approach for an email maybe a few weeks later, maybe even a phone call if we're getting close to that due date deadline. Once we get past due, we could be as proactive or maybe as hands-off as you guys prefer, right? At the end of the day, it is indeed your burden to bear. They are your borrowers. So as you guys start to think about these aspects of things, the number and the cadence are really up to you. Because the reality is, if you guys pick the appropriate business partner to handle these things, or heaven forbid, you just develop the things yourself, you can scale this to fit whatever process that you feel is going to be most appropriate for you and your institution. As we identify trends of what worked and what did not work, as a lot of things in life are iterative, much like those CISO calculations we won't talk about today, we might want to be able to adjust them over time. So how do we do this for ourselves and them, right? How can we make this symbiotic and a win-win for everyone involved? Well, guys, if we think about simultaneously providing them a digital landing place to provide those documents, we might alleviate some of the pain. A, we can address maybe the Gen X, the Gen Y, and our particularly tech-savvy boomer borrowers that may not physically have the time to make it into the branch. It's not that they don't want to see you and that you don't want to see them, but wouldn't it be to sit down and discuss something of importance versus the updated financials? Additionally, we can do this in a secure rack. We can do it digitally. It costs us less time for all parties involved. And if we really want to expand on some of the best practices that we've discussed to this point, get their consent to go straight to the source. If we can actually provide, as I'm going to show you guys in this better example, a notion whereby maybe we let them know 45 days before the due date via letter, that we also have a portal that we're going to follow up with via email, and then we're going to send it a few days later once we know they've had an opportunity to receive and open their letters. Now they can provide us those without having to follow kind of our traditional format where we're getting more paper than we really desire. Or should we have gone straight to the source and said, if we have your permission and your good graces to actually go directly to your accountant or maybe your insurance agent, maybe even internally we think about this to go to an attorney for outside counsel for document preparation, maybe even appraisers. We can stack these requests at the time frames in which we feel are most pertinent to us. To give you guys a quick look at how specifically SageWorks would handle these items, it is with completely customized templates for either the institution at large or even specific borrowers if you have to get detailed and treat folks maybe specifically if they are maybe a high-value borrower. Not that there isn't a high-value borrower, but some maybe more than others, right? You would never admit that. But you can see here on the left side, a letter, or on the right-hand side, an email that would allow you very simply in your own organic language and convention the opportunity to make this a little bit simpler at, again, the intervals of your choosing. If the borrower were to follow that secure portal link, it would allow them send the login. So no, jumping through hoops required here to see exactly what we are requesting and for whom we are requesting it with no capability for compromise whatsoever. The only thing that can be done here, to be very specific, is to upload the document directly to the institution and either delete and try again or submit. As the borrower, this cannot be retrieved. And if we were to maybe perhaps send this to a vendor with multiple requests, it could be one email for hypothetically 10 mutual clients. One quick point of entry for your business partner, right? Exactly as I'm suggesting here. Simultaneously for yourself, the borrower, and your business partners. What does this solve for at the end of the day when we think about kind of the process that we've been doing and trying to maybe cut paper instead of acquiring paper and then scanning it and saying it's paperless, even though we're still shredding quite a bit of it? First and foremost, we are paper-free with digital documents. Secondly, it's easier on the borrower. It's much faster for you or them. We can automatically track the ticklers, as we maybe perhaps didn't mention, as they come through the portal. They are automatically received, satisfied, and pushed towards the next period based upon your parameters. But this also gives us a proper avenue for receiving those electronic tax returns, whereby, believe it or not, should they upload that appropriate document in the appropriate format, that can be automatically spread without anyone having to do anything other than review and adjust as necessary. In the meantime, we are automatically storing the document, thus eliminating kind of that paper to paperless conversion, if you will. Maybe not holistically. This is not a perfect world. But I would argue the more that we can get now, the better and faster that transition occurs for you guys as institutions over time. So we'll take this opportunity to hit on our third and final point, and I will be brief with you guys here. I did work backwards for a specific reason, because I would argue in the order in which we went is the easiest that we have seen numerous times in adoption from the business partners with SageWorks, the financial institutions that utilize our solution, that it is much easier to bite off pieces at a time as opposed to taking on the entire whale in a bite. If we were to take our application strategy, maybe perhaps on the upfront side of the business, where we are digitally originating, we're now setting a completely different precedent, whereby we're saying, we really love the fact that you're here in the branch, you can fill out this application, but maybe perhaps not with your hand. If you would like to type this data in to our system, or if we have information about you already residing in our core or our native business intelligence systems, we can skip those steps and get straight to the request, right? Let's get to the point. Let's get to the bottom dollar of what matters. How can we help you in the best amount of time for you? Some of the features which are somewhat unimportant, I would argue, when we think about the concepts, that's really what I want to focus on here. Yes, we can customize it to look how you need it to look aesthetically. And yes, the requirements are going to fit your business needs, your policy. Every institution's a little bit different. The reality, the real takeaway here is this could be done by the borrower themselves in the branch, or you could set them up with the registration. It takes approximately 20 to 30 seconds. And they could do this at their home, at their own convenience. So no need to bring that folder into the branch and then forget the one document that you then have to image at a later date in your potentially paperless process. We can literally capture this on their terms, on their time, at their house. They are indeed the arbiter of how quickly this gets done. And should we have to give them a little bit of a encouragement to get things moving, maybe we send them a quick reminder or maybe a personal email. Depending on the appetite of your institution, this could live on your website. This can be white labeled to fit onto your website, where if you really want to start following, I think the direction that most folks are going based upon the feedback I'm getting eventually is to be able to digitize this process and increase the web presence beyond what they currently have to make it faster and easier. To give you guys just a very quick look, the needed profile data, the capability to send us the required documents based upon your business parameters, or one of the quick little features you may not notice on the right-hand side, to email their accountant or attorney for the appropriate documentation should they not have it, for secure transfer directly to the appropriate place. What are we doing here? We're simultaneously improving the borrower experience while increasing our own efficiencies and maybe making perhaps our lives a little bit better. I would really hesitate to ask you guys what you might have to do with a little bit extra time when you wear a bunch of hats. You might actually get back to doing your job versus some of the mundane things that eat up quite a bit of your time today, as I hear on a daily basis. What would allow me time to perform CECL calculations? What would allow my lenders to hit the road a little bit more often and actually develop relationships versus having to focus on production and back office tasks, right? We're putting people to work in the way that they want to work, where they are making a far more significant difference because we are enabling them with technologies that literally take away tasks that require no expertise to do. I would want an analyst to be able to take a data set and then be able to do the work that they need to do, which is make adjustments. That is their strength. That is one of the key reasons, fundamentally, why they're brought into the institution at large. This is an efficiency play for everybody, and it's also an ease play, right? It's a better experience. Do we get back faster? Do we reduce errors? What is the end in mind? And really, what was I getting to with this entire process? Was not particularly, guys, to inundate you with opinions and things that we've just potentially seen, because we have these conversations every day. This is really what the conversation is at the financial institution level quite often. And really, guys, it's this. It's not only spending more time and providing a better service to the borrowers, but FinTech is on the way, right? FinTech, alternative lenders, whatever language or term we would like to label on them, they can put together tools to compete from an efficiency standpoint. What that also means is that with efficiency, they can get decisions pretty quickly. We're not going to name any names, but I'm sure you guys know some of them that are out there and that are rather prevalent. Some of them are even on TV, maybe even during the Super Bowl, right? How do we particularly beat those folks? If we are the first. If we're the catalyst for this type of process and we provide a better experience fundamentally anyways, This is how we keep the folks in our town borrowing from us, not just on the basis of relationships, but actually making it two-way, more efficient and easier for everybody involved. So with that, guys, a lot of information that I have provided to you today. And I believe our arbiter Elise has a question.
Yeah, so we just have a quick poll question, and that poll question is live now. If you want to go ahead and start answering it, we'd love to get feedback from our webinar attendees as to what you guys are thinking. So based on what you've heard today, what applications do you think that eliminating the manual data entry would be most useful for your institution? Is that going to be faster loan origination turnaround times? Is that going to be in your loan admin, renewals, annual reviews process? Is it going to be, are you looking at maybe like a digital loan application process, implementing that gets you paperless, or improving accuracy? If you don't have to type things in, you make fewer errors. So definitely I'll leave this open for a couple more seconds here so let everybody get their answers in, and then we'll take some time for questions. All right, just a couple more seconds on this. We'll make sure everybody has a chance to vote. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close that here. And let's see, sorry, it's taking just a minute to close. There we go. And yeah, so this will be our last call for any questions that anybody has about anything we discussed here today, anything specific to your institution. If you would prefer that we not address it on the webinar, if you want to send in a question, I know a few people have indicated like we follow up with afterwards. We don't have to go over stuff here. If you've got maybe some more specific to your institution questions. But we'll just hang out for just a minute and see if anybody has any questions. But thank you all so much for attending today.
Yes, we certainly thank you guys for your time. I will follow up with you guys individually. I'm going to leave this open for a moment to let any last final questions trickle in. They do seem to be kind of specific. And we thank you guys for your time today. You have a great afternoon.